Hi, I'm Jenn Gustetic with NASA. I'm their Prizes and Challenges Program Executive, and I'm honored to be here today to be able to interview two public sector prize administrators who have experience running prizes in the public sector. We have with us today Dr. Alok Das, who is a senior scientist for design innovation at the Air Force Research Laboratory. And he's been working on things including the Air Force Pavilion for prizes. So we'll discuss with him a little bit today what work he's been doing on that pavilion. And we also have Jean Lupinacci, who is the director of the Energy Star Commercial Buildings Program at EPA. And she's going to talk to us a bit today about EPA's Battle of the Buildings. I'll let them introduce themselves very quickly, though, if there's anything you'd like to add about your background or what you bring to the discussion today.
Please.
Well, I've been with EPA for 27 years now, so most of my career, and this is the first time we've gotten into this kind of competition prize arena.
Great.
I've been with the Air Force Research Lab for about 28 years, similar to you.
Oh.
And we first tried competitions about 5 years ago when they were very young. And we had a little bit of mixed response then. We were basically learning, and we re-examined our process and really got into it 2 years ago. So much better response this time.
Great. So can you guys at a high level describe what prizes you've been involved with up until this point? I know that you've done several in your pavilion and you guys have experienced one. So maybe you could start us off with talking about the program or the project that you've used to approach prize competitions.
So this time around, having learned some lessons a few years ago, we partnered with Innocentive, which is one of the providers. There are many providers in this area, and we partnered with Innocentive mainly because we thought they had a larger solution pool. As you know, in open innovation, the idea really is that you have a problem, somebody out there has solved it in some related field. The question is, how can you pose your problem to a large number of people so that you can get an answer? So we partnered with Innocentive, and we signed a contract with them to work on 20 problems over 2 years. So we have a little bit past our first year, and we have done 10 of them. And we have had about 70% success rate, so we're doing much better this year.
Great. So Jean, do you want to give us a high-level overview of the prize that you've been exposed to?
Well, sure. Maybe I could, before I say the actual prize, because our prize is actually just the bragging rights of being a winner. But because EPA is doing this in the context of our already existing Energy Star program. So the way we came upon trying to add in some type of a prize element to our program was really because we identified the fact that we needed more awareness, just mainstream awareness, that buildings that we all work in and play in and learn in actually use a lot of energy, a lot of it's wasted, and that wasted energy contributes to greenhouse gas emission reductions. And so we needed a way to put a face on this energy efficiency thing that is so often just a boiler room, BTU kind of conversation. And the way we thought we would do that is to elevate it to let's have teams in buildings competing against each other to see who could reduce the most energy in 1 year. And we basically just used a very common weight loss sort of an analogy, because buildings are fat. They use too much energy when they don't really need to, and we can put them all on a diet and get everyone working towards slimming them down, and that was the point. So it's just something that exists within the framework of an already existing program.
Great. So you described one way in which prizes have proven to be useful towards particular problems within your program area. I'm curious if you could give us some examples of the types of problems you guys have addressed through the pavilion at the Air Force Research Lab.
So one interesting problem, one of the first ones we did, deals with how do you stop an uncooperative vehicle? And similar problems occurs in the country when you have when the police are going after somebody who doesn't want to stop. You have people on the side, you don't want to do anything which will cause this vehicle to tip over or hit somebody else. So it's one of those dilemmas. How do you really stop him without hurting somebody? And usually it's a bystander. In the situation we are in the deployed areas, we have a similar situation where somebody who doesn't want to stop at a checkpoint. So that was the problem. How do you stop a vehicle who doesn't want to stop, an uncooperative vehicle, without hurting either the driver or damaging the car? And so that was one of the first things we tried in a partnership with Innocentive. And the problem was put out for 2 months, basically 60 days. We put the problem out. We had a fairly large, I don't remember the actual numbers now top of my head, but we had about 1,000 or so people who showed interest in working in it. And we had, I believe, over 100 people who actually developed solutions, submitted solutions. And it's interesting, the person we selected and who won the award, I believe is a 65-year-old retired mechanical engineer from Lima, Peru. Now the chance of finding that person on our own is virtually zero. I mean, what is the chance of somebody, a retired mechanical engineer from Lima, Peru, is going to bid on a regular solicitation? So I think we found, and the prize was about $20,000 or so. And we now have an in-house team which is taking that idea we bought and is developing a product out of it.
Great.
And then we'll work with both police here and with the military police, both commercial, civilian police and military police, to actually start testing the solution and adapt it.
Yeah, and great. And I think one of the particularly interesting benefits of prize competitions that this example illustrates is its ability to bring people that aren't the usual suspects
Correct.
into the discussion and the problem-solving activity.
Yeah.
You described some of the people and the breadth of the people
Yeah.
that came forward to say that they were interested in trying to work with you in solving this problem.
Yeah.
I'm curious for your prize competition, if you found that there were people that you don't typically work with that participated in some way, or even if the solution came from a source that you may not have been expecting to solve the problem.
That's a good question, because a little bit different. We weren't looking for solutions to a technical problem where we might not know where it was, but I think one of the big issues around trying to reduce energy use in buildings is that everyone plays a role. The buildings exist because people are doing something in them, and every person and individual plays a role in the overall energy use within the building. And so the broader participation that EPA was looking for within this kind of a competition was a platform that allowed everyone, the nurses in the hospitals, the doctors, the tenants in the office buildings, even the students, the middle school kids and the students in dorms all got involved. We raised awareness that not only is it possible to reduce energy within a short period of time, but everyone plays a role. So that's the audience that we were looking to capture, not your typical suspects when you're looking to say how does a business make significant reductions in their buildings.
Interesting. So what would you say would be one of the major lessons that you learned in trying to engage the people that are necessary in order to make this change differently?
I think one of the things that I would advise people to do, in the sense if they're looking at solving a similar problem to what we were doing, is one, to keep it within their core mission. I mean, we were able to accomplish a lot because we embedded this competition within an already existing framework. We understood the motivations and the barriers of the people we were trying to reach, and we designed the competition specifically to get at that. So it's hard to just go out and say, oh, I want to do one of those, but not actually understand what your goals are. So that was sort of important and a lesson. And even though we had to make changes along the way, we had to keep within that goal. You have to be flexible, but you need to sort of keep that goal in mind and not stray from it.
So it forced you to think through that goal a lot more in advance than maybe you would have had to through other
Yes,
approaches.
it did. And it didn't actually cost us a lot to do this because we were relying on already the existing infrastructure, of which is the Energy Star program. So it was more about guiding people to the already existing materials, increasing the awareness, encouraging the demand for people to use them. And so that's why I think we had been quite successful. In fact, our first prize, or we call it a prize, we just call it a competition, but was in 2010. And we're now launching our third year of the competition because we recognized how much excitement and involvement could actually be generated with such a thing.
Great. What about you?
We actually run two different things, and let me elaborate on the second one. So first thing I described were award challenges. We also do design challenges. So this year we invited 17 universities from across the country to participate as part of the senior design project, capstone design project with mechanical engineers to compete in a particular problem we gave them. And the problem we gave them is very simple. Just like Batman has a device, as you know, when you can shoot up and then zip up to the building. He said, that's what we want. Very simple description of problem. So the first thing is that the problem you select should excite people. It should be easy to explain. It shouldn't be something that requires 5 pages to explain what you're asking about. And connection to the Batman was very easy to explain. Obviously, we didn't expect them to create something exactly like that, but they understood what we were looking at. The wall they had to climb using a device like this was not easy. It was a hard problem, 90-foot sheer wall. It wasn't something which was trivial. That we had a final competition actually in Dayton, Ohio. We actually had a 90-foot wall, and all 17 schools came. They were from across the country, and it's interesting how different schools handled it. The winner, by the way, was Utah State, a well-known engineering program. But it's interesting who came second, and a very close second was University of Minnesota Duluth, a small school, and they really took the whole thing. And very different ways. And you could see that students and the teams and the professors determined that they're going to win. And we hold a similar competition among the 3 military academies, you know, the Air Force Academy, West Point, and Naval Academy. And that gets very serious.
Yeah, I would imagine.
None of them want to lose. So, I mean, the problem has to be challenging. It has got to be something which your particular people you're going after can actually solve. It should motivate them, excite them. We were doing it as part of STEM. We were trying to make engineering, science, and tech more fun. But they got really into it. So this is a 3-year program we have started. First year is just over. Now we are selecting the problem for the second year. And we'll do it again.
Do you mind if I
Sure.
expand on
Yeah.
something that you said? Because we had the exact same experience about keeping it simple in the messaging and solvable. A couple of other things that you mentioned I wanted to reiterate.
Yeah.
One was the time frame from which you do this kind of a competition. What we learned was it has to be within a period of time that makes the problem or what you're trying to do workable. Like saving energy, it usually is over a long period of time from which you do that. But people lose interest very quickly. And so if you really want to create the excitement and build off this peer competition, you can't make the period too long that people really, and you were talking about something like 60 days in one case. And our period, even though we were looking at year-to-year energy use reductions, the actual competition was about 6 months. And we found that that's anything that much longer, people were kind of losing interest.
Well, that's a very, very valid point. I mean, in our capstone design project, there's a natural period. It's the senior year. Because that's how capstone designs are done. In the first semester, you kind of do the design, and second semester, you make it. So we had a natural thing. They have 2 semesters to do the job. But you're right. If you make it too long, then the people are going to lose interest. You can't make it too short because they don't have enough time. So there's a delicate balance.
Yes, yes. And I think we also want to give opportunity to open up questions to folks that are following the hashtag on Twitter as well. So for those of you that maybe haven't been tweeting in your questions, feel free to do that over the next couple minutes as I ask one of my last questions. And then I'll ask the folks that are monitoring the tweet stream to let us know if there's any good questions from the audience. So one of the final questions that I have for you guys is, knowing where you sat a year ago or 3 years ago, when you started 4 years ago, when you started thinking about prize competitions, and the skills that you've had to refine, and the relationships internally, organizations you've had to build in order to run a successful prize, what would be maybe your top 2 or 3 pieces of advice for a prize manager who is a to-be prize manager, so someone who wants to do one but is just about to get their feet wet? What would you have wished you knew when you started out on your prize journey?
Let me start what we think the issues are. You have to spend, we look at the prizes in 3 phases really. And most of what we're describing today is phase 1. And you have to take in phase 1, you have to take a fair amount of time making sure that you're selecting the right problem. Are you asking the right question? what part of it you're really going after. Is that the right thing to be solved with the prize? Initially, when we did it a few years ago, we didn't do it right. So we knew we couldn't do it that way. Then you pose the problem, of course. You buy a solution. That's phase one. You still don't have a solution. You just bought the idea. Phase two is when we actually make it. We try it out, productize it. And then phase three is really the most important, where you work with the users to transition it. Because unless that occurs, it's still just an idea. So it's really a three-phase thing. And a lot of people, and we, including us, really focus on just the phase one. What happens after you have the idea or you bought the idea?
So a lot of what you found is that there's an importance in infusing what you learn
Exactly.
into the way that you do
Exactly.
business. And some of what you've learned has shown that the prize competition is only at the beginning stage
Correct.
of how then you infuse it. The
Correct.
infusion path could look differently than just what the outputs of the prize competition are.
Exactly.
And so that would be an important initial criteria when someone's thinking about selecting what could be a candidate for a prize competition. To what degree do we believe that this could be infused back into the business? Is there a business user? Is there a
Exactly.
pathway that we could take this down in order to get it to a point where we could use it?
Correct.
Great. So what about your advice
Well,
for
and
future prize managers?
I would echo that. Sounds also part of our lesson. I can't, of course, always reiterate, you sort of need to define your goals and what you're looking for, and you should be trying to check that you've met your goals, and I think we have done a fair amount to evaluate whether we've accomplished what we've wanted to accomplish, and we believe we have in terms of both greenhouse gas emissions and awareness raising. But I think designing how you're going to award the award, what the award is based on, is also very important. And we needed it to be based in a transparent and objective way. And that's, I think people need to think through the whole set, the whole problem, and how will it be evaluated. And we learned a lot because we made a few modifications along the way in terms of who was going to verify the reductions. We had taken on the burden as the EPA in the first round, and we realized that that was more administrative burden than we could bear because we weren't spending much money on this, and now we've put the verification off to the competitors.
Great point. And to build upon that point, I think it's really important, building on what you're saying, to think through how you test and verify solutions, because the level of effort and the cost associated with doing that could be high, depending on what you're looking to test and verify. So some X-Prize type prize competitions can end up costing a lot of money with a racetrack to test the speed of those cars because they're within a half of a second of one another. And if you don't want to use a stopwatch for that, because then you're going to get sued. If there's any chance that the first and second prize could have been a human error thing. So it's very, very important up front to think through how you're going to test and verify and select solutions, kind of that judging and demonstration protocol. So it seems like we actually have a question from the Twitter sphere. So if you guys would go ahead and share that with us.
We do. So the question is, are there any best practices for prize managers getting organizational buy-in to enter a challenge?
Start with?
Just to make sure, meaning within our own internal organization, how to...
Yes, for instance, someone says,
Yeah.
hey, this looks like a cool thing to do.
How do I get that approved?
Exactly.
Yes. Well, I think in our case at EPA and through the Energy Star program, it wasn't quite as hard because it wasn't something outside of what we normally do within our program. And we weren't actually even asking for many resources to do it. It was more of a structure from how we would organize our work and how we would communicate with our partners and offer things. So our approval wasn't that difficult in the sense that it was already within an existing structure.
Similar to that, I think it helps if the problem you are going after fits within the broader scope of what your agency does. Secondly, it really helps if your senior leadership, whether it's your director or whoever it may be, buys into that idea, because you will need top cover. There will be people who will come out and argue with you, why are you doing this? And a lot of the speakers today talked about that. So it really does help if you have some top cover. And also it helps to have a little bit of bottoms-up support. You can usually find younger people who are excited by the idea of prizes and are willing to join you. So really you have to get it from both sides. Get some top cover, but also excite the young people and get them to participate with you.
Those are all great points, and I think in addition to the senior leadership buy-in to any prize team, it's really important to make sure you have a lawyer on your side.
Yes, yes.
That there's a lawyer that you're working with to understand intellectual property, to understand the rules that you're developing, to understand all of the different things that go into writing the terms and conditions that someone enters into when they're going to be participating in a prize. I would also say another important member is someone that really understands outreach and communications.
Yeah,
Yes.
So, because if you build it, they will not necessarily come.
correct. I think
So
another-
understanding communications and how to infuse social media, especially since oftentimes solvers are several degrees removed from the initial group of folks that you think will solve the problem, leveraging networks can be very, very important, and social networking can help you do that.
all I was saying was now with the number of providers who are available, sometimes you can go to one of the providers and they do provide many of the services you're talking about. It does cost you a little bit, but they take care of the IP issues, the legal issues and things like that. And they really do walk you through the goods and the bads. So they help you navigate this whole thing, how to sell it, how to compose the problem. So nowadays actually there are some really good providers, and one suggestion I always have is go with them.
Yep, great point. And so the last two resources that I think we direct the audience to would be the OMB guidance that came
Correct.
out in 2009 about the different authorities that you can use to do prize competitions as a competition manager. That's going to be very, very important to understand what your legal basis is for doing it. And secondarily, the GSA schedule that was, I think, set up about a year ago that have a bunch of prize vendors that provide the services that he's speaking about that you can actually leverage as a new way to procure those services that wasn't available before a couple years ago. So I'm going to go ahead and thank these guys for taking
Thank
the
you.
time to talk with
Thank
us
you.
today, and thank the folks online that took some time to send in questions, and keep watching because there's more coming on after this.